After many months battling recurrent prostate cancer, Charlie Wilson has shared with the public. He was a guest on Oprah's podcast and discussed what he believes is crucial to his recovery. Cancer is caused by your own cells. It's not something that comes from outside. It starts with 1, then 2, then 100, then 1,000 of your own cells trying to eat other healthy cells. If you provide energy to healthy cells, you increase your chances of recovery. It's a physiological issue. You have to move. I beat it before in 2008. For him, recovery doesn't depend on the mind. The mind, cancer doesn't care about it. That means the only way to have energy is to move, he explained. He confided that he's no longer afraid of death. When I was your age, I was very afraid of dying. I used to tell myself, how can this be? Every time I visited my deceased grandparents, I'd tell myself, but think about it. They're still here. And when you grow up and realize that it can happen, first of all, nature is created very well, because as you get older, it becomes less and less forgiving. In short, you can no longer eat exactly what you want. So I'm not afraid of it anymore. Regarding his health and the cancer he has been fighting for many months, Charlie Wilson remains positive and optimistic. It's a daily battle, both conscious and beyond my control. There are factors strongly supporting a good prognosis, and there are also factors showing we must be extremely cautious about the possibility of recurrence. Charles Kent Wilson was born on January 29, 1953 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, into a family where music wasn't just entertainment, but rather a way of life, a calling, and ultimately a path to survival and meaning. His father, Oscar Wilson, was a minister, and his mother, Lula Wilson, led the church choir. From his earliest memories, Charlie was immersed in gospel music, the powerful, emotionally expressive tradition of Black church singing that would profoundly influence his vocal style and musical approach throughout his career. Charlie was one of 3 brothers who would all become musicians. Along with his brothers Ronnie and Robert Wilson, Charlie sang in the church choir and learned instruments, developing musical skills that seemed as natural as breathing. The Wilson household was filled with music, gospel primarily, but also the R&B and soul music that was revolutionizing American music during Charlie's childhood and adolescence in the 1950s and 1960s. Growing up in Tulsa during this era meant witnessing both the beauty of tight-knit Black community and the harsh realities of segregation and racism. Tulsa carried particular historical trauma, the site of the 1921 race massacre, where white mobs had destroyed the prosperous Black neighborhood of Greenwood, killing hundreds of Black residents. While this history wasn't always openly discussed, its shadow hung over Black Tulsa, a reminder of the violence that could erupt and the precariousness of Black success and prosperity. For the Wilson brothers, music provided both spiritual foundation through gospel and potential economic opportunity through secular performance. As teenagers in the late 1960s, they began performing together, initially as the Greenwood Archer and Pine Street Band, a name referencing the streets of Tulsa's Black neighborhood. The name was later shortened to the Gap Band, which would become their professional identity and the vehicle for Charlie Wilson's rise to fame. The Gap Band, with Charlie Wilson on lead vocals, emerged in the 1970s as one of the premier funk bands of the era. Their sound combined funk rhythms, R&B melodicism, rock energy, and the gospel-influenced vocals that Charlie brought from his church background. The result was infectious, danceable music that packed clubs and eventually arenas, making the Gap Band one of the most successful acts of the late 1970s and 1980s. Hits like You Dropped a Bomb on Me, 1982, Outstanding, 1982, Early in the Morning, 1982, and Burn Rubber on Me, 1980, became funk classics, still played at parties and sampled by hip-hop artists decades later. Charlie's vocals, smooth, powerful, capable of both tender crooning and energetic shouting, became the Gap Band's signature, instantly recognizable and deeply influential on subsequent R&B and funk vocalists. The Gap Band's success meant touring constantly, performing night after night in cities across America and internationally. They shared stages and bills with legendary acts like Parliament Funkadelic, Earth, Wind and Fire, and numerous other giants of black music. For Charlie and his brothers, this success represented achievement of dreams that had seemed impossibly distant when they were kids singing in their father's church in Tulsa. However, the lifestyle that accompanied success planted seeds of destruction that would nearly kill Charlie Wilson and derail the Gap Band's trajectory. The music industry of the 1970s and 1980s was awash in drugs, cocaine particularly, but also heroin, pills, and alcohol. The constant touring, the pressure to perform night after night, the access to substances that promised energy when exhausted or relaxation when wired, the enablers and hangers-on who provided whatever the stars wanted, all created an environment where addiction flourished. Charlie Wilson began using cocaine and alcohol heavily during the Gap Band's peak success. What started as recreational use, partying after shows, cocaine to maintain energy during grueling tour schedules, gradually became dependence, and then full-blown addiction. As his addiction progressed, Charlie's behavior became increasingly erratic, his performances less reliable, his personal relationships strained and broken by the chaos that addiction creates. The tragedy was that even as the Gap Band achieved greater commercial success, Charlie was destroying himself. The gap between public success and private dysfunction widened until it became unsustainable. By the mid-1980s, despite continued hits and sold-out shows, Charlie Wilson was in free fall, his addiction consuming him and threatening to end both his career and his life. Charlie Wilson's addiction ultimately led him to one of the most extreme naders any successful musician has experienced: homelessness on the streets of Los Angeles. By the mid-1990s, Charlie had lost everything: his money spent or stolen to support his habit, his relationships destroyed by his addiction, his career derailed by unreliability and erratic behavior. He found himself literally living on the streets, sleeping in alleys, scrounging for food, existing in the kind of desperate poverty that seemed impossible for someone who had once filled arenas and earned millions. The specifics of Charlie's homelessness were particularly stark. He has described sleeping behind a car wash, going days without eating, being so deep in addiction that obtaining his next hit mattered more than basic survival needs, like food and shelter. He was recognized occasionally by people who remembered the Gap Band's heyday, experiencing the particular shame of being identified as a fallen star, someone who had everything and lost it to addiction. This period of Charlie's life, homeless, desperate, seemingly beyond redemption, represents both the absolute bottom of addiction and the powerful testament to recovery that his subsequent life embodies. That someone could fall so far and climb back represents hope for anyone struggling with addiction. Proof that recovery is possible, even from the most desperate circumstances. Several factors saved Charlie Wilson's life. First was the intervention of people who cared about him and refused to give up. Friends from the music industry, family members who hadn't completely severed ties, people who remembered who Charlie had been and believed he could be that person again. They helped get Charlie into treatment, providing both the practical support, finding programs, arranging admission, covering costs, and the emotional support necessary for someone to believe recovery was possible. Second was Charlie's own decision, at some point during his homelessness, hitting whatever bottom he needed to hit, to finally accept that he couldn't continue as he was, to surrender, to accept help, to commit to recovery, even though it meant facing all the pain, shame, and reality he'd been using substances to avoid. Addiction recovery requires this personal commitment. No amount of external support can create it, though external support makes acting on that commitment possible. Charlie Wilson entered recovery in the mid-1990s, beginning the long, difficult process of addressing his addiction, rebuilding his life, and seeing if any career remained possible for someone whose most recent public association was not with musical excellence, but with the catastrophic personal failure his addiction represented. Recovery from severe addiction is never simply about stopping substance use. It requires addressing the underlying pain, trauma, and dysfunction that drove addiction in the first place. For Charlie, this meant confronting childhood experiences, the pressures of fame and success, the losses and disappointments that substances had helped him avoid feeling. It meant developing new coping mechanisms, building support systems, and fundamentally changing how he approached life, relationships, and himself. The early years of recovery were fragile and difficult. The temptation to use again was constant, particularly during times of stress or difficulty. Charlie had to learn to live without the substances that had been his primary coping mechanism for years. He had to rebuild relationships with family members he'd hurt during his addiction, particularly his brothers, who had watched helplessly as he destroyed himself. He had to face the financial devastation his addiction had caused and figure out how to survive economically. Slowly, painfully, Charlie rebuilt. He stayed sober. He reconnected with his musical gifts, remembering that music had been his calling before it had been his career, that singing had brought him joy and purpose before it had brought fame and access to substances. He began performing again, small gigs at first, rebuilding both his skills and his reputation. What emerged from recovery was a different Charlie Wilson, humbler, more grateful, deeply aware of how close he'd come to death, and determined to use his second chance meaningfully. His voice, remarkably, had survived largely intact despite years of abuse. The smooth, powerful instrument that had defined the Gap Band's sound was still there, perhaps with some added character and depth from the life experience and suffering he'd endured. Charlie Wilson's solo career, properly launched in the 2000s, represented both artistic comeback and redemption narrative. He positioned himself as Uncle Charlie, the elder statesman, the survivor, the voice of experience offering wisdom alongside entertainment. This positioning was authentic rather than calculated. Charlie genuinely had lived through experiences that gave him perspective and credibility when singing about life, love, loss, and survival. His 2000 album Bridging the Gap began his solo career in earnest, but it was subsequent albums, Charlie, Last Name Wilson, 2005, Uncle Charlie, 2009, Love Charlie, 2013, In It to Win It, 2017, that established him as solo artist capable of commercial success and critical respect separate from his Gap Band legacy. Songs like Charlie, Last Name Wilson, There Goes My Baby, and You Are became R&B hits, showcasing Charlie's voice and his ability to connect with contemporary audiences while honoring traditional soul and funk roots. Younger artists embraced Charlie, featuring him on their tracks and citing him as influence. Snoop Dogg collaborated with Charlie on multiple songs, bringing him to hip-hop audiences who might not have known his earlier work. Kanye West sampled the Gap Band and expressed admiration for Charlie's artistry. Bruno Mars credited Charlie as major influence on his own style. This cross-generational respect validated Charlie's continued relevance and ensured that his music reached beyond the nostalgia market to connect with new listeners. Throughout his solo career, Charlie has been open about his addiction and recovery, using his platform to inspire others struggling with substance abuse. He speaks at recovery events, shares his story in interviews, and positions himself as living proof that recovery is possible, that lives can be rebuilt, that past mistakes don't determine future possibilities. This advocacy work has been as important to Charlie as his music, giving meaning and purpose to his suffering by using it to help others. In 2008, at age 55, Charlie Wilson was diagnosed with prostate cancer. The diagnosis came during a routine checkup, the kind of preventive care that Charlie, having survived addiction and homelessness, was diligent about maintaining. Prostate cancer is one of the most common cancers in men, particularly Black men, who face significantly higher rates of both incidence and mortality from the disease. Charlie's response to the diagnosis was characteristically direct and public. He announced the diagnosis, underwent treatment, likely surgery, and possibly radiation therapy. Those specific details weren't extensively publicized, and used his platform to encourage other men, particularly Black men, to get screened. Prostate cancer, when caught early as Charlie's was, is highly treatable with excellent survival rates. However, many men avoid screening out of fear or discomfort with the examinations required, leading to later diagnoses when treatment is less effective. Charlie framed his cancer battle as another fight to survive, connecting it implicitly to his recovery from addiction, both requiring similar qualities of determination, faith, medical intervention, and refusal to surrender. He maintained his touring and recording schedule as much as treatment allowed, determined that cancer wouldn't define or limit him any more than addiction had. The treatment was successful, and Charlie achieved remission. For over a decade, he was cancer-free, continuing his musical career and his advocacy work around both addiction recovery and men's health. He seemed to have beaten cancer just as he'd beaten addiction, another testament to resilience, another proof that challenges could be overcome through faith, medical science, determination, and support. However, in recent months, Charlie Wilson's prostate cancer has recurred, a devastating development that represents one of the cruelest aspects of cancer survival. Even successful treatment doesn't guarantee permanent cure. Cancer can return months or years later, requiring renewed treatment and facing potentially worse prognosis than initial diagnosis. Recurrent prostate cancer is more difficult to treat than initial diagnosis. The cancer cells may have developed resistance to previous treatments, may be more aggressive, may have spread to other parts of the body. Treatment options for recurrence are more limited and often less effective. The psychological impact of recurrence is also significant. The hope that cancer was defeated must confront the reality that it has returned, that the fight isn't over, that survival remains uncertain. Charlie's decision to discuss his cancer recurrence publicly, appearing on Oprah's podcast and other platforms to talk about his battle, reflects his characteristic openness and his commitment to using his experience to potentially help others. By sharing his struggle, Charlie provides visibility to an experience that many cancer survivors face, but that often remains private and invisible. Charlie's approach to fighting cancer, as he described on Oprah's podcast, emphasizes physical movement and energy rather than mental attitude. This perspective is both scientifically supported and personally meaningful for Charlie, whose recovery from addiction similarly required physical action, going to meetings, changing environments, building new habits, rather than simply willing himself to sobriety. Research does support the benefits of physical activity during cancer treatment and recovery. Exercise can reduce treatment side effects, maintain strength and function, improve mood and quality of life, and potentially even enhance treatment effectiveness and reduce recurrence risk. The mechanisms are complex, involving immune function, inflammation reduction, hormonal effects, and other physiological processes. But the overall evidence suggests that movement and physical activity benefit cancer patients. Charlie's emphasis on providing energy to healthy cells by staying active reflects his understanding that fighting cancer requires supporting the body's natural defenses and resilience, rather than simply attacking cancer cells. This holistic approach, combining medical treatment with lifestyle factors that support overall health, represents current best understanding of cancer care. His dismissal of mental attitude, "cancer doesn't care about it," might seem to contradict popular narratives about positive thinking and fighting spirit. However, Charlie isn't suggesting that attitude is irrelevant, but rather that it's not sufficient. Physical action, medical treatment, physiological support for healthy cells, these are necessary regardless of mental state. The danger of overemphasizing mental attitude is the implicit blame it can place on patients whose cancers progress despite their positive outlook, as if they didn't fight hard enough or believe strongly enough. Charlie's reflection on no longer fearing death represents a profound shift that often accompanies aging and survival of life-threatening challenges. Having nearly died from addiction, having faced cancer twice, having lived long enough to experience the body's gradual decline and limitations, all have given Charlie perspective on mortality that younger people typically lack. His observation that when you get older, it becomes less and less forgiving captures a truth about aging, the body's reduced resilience, the accumulation of restrictions and limitations, the loss of simple pleasures like eating whatever one wants. This isn't pessimism, but rather realism born from lived experience. Aging, while preferable to the alternative, involves loss and limitation that can make the prospect of death less terrifying than it was when life seemed unlimited. Charlie's memory of visiting his deceased grandparents and thinking, "They're still here," reflects a spiritual understanding that consciousness, identity, and connection transcend physical death. Whether understood as religious belief in afterlife, metaphorical sense, that we persist in others' memories, or actual spiritual continuation, this conviction provides comfort and reduces existential fear. For someone who has survived as much as Charlie Wilson, addiction that should have killed him, cancer that could have killed him, the countless dangers of homelessness on LA's streets, the fact that he's reached 71 years old represents bonus time. Every additional day, every additional performance, every additional connection with loved ones or fans, all are gifts that might not have been, that easily could have been lost to addiction or cancer or any of the other ways that lives end prematurely. Charlie's description of his current situation, a daily battle, both conscious and beyond my control, captures the complicated reality of living with serious illness. There are aspects he can control: staying active, following treatment protocols, maintaining positive relationships, taking care of his overall health, and aspects entirely beyond his control, whether cancer cells respond to treatment, whether disease progresses or recedes, ultimately, whether he survives. The acknowledgement of factors strongly supporting a good prognosis, alongside factors demanding caution about the possibility of recurrence, reflects the uncertainty that characterizes serious illness. Doctors can provide statistics and probabilities, but can't guarantee individual outcomes. Charlie must live in this space of uncertainty, hoping for the best while preparing for various possibilities, maintaining determination to fight while accepting that fighting doesn't guarantee victory. This psychological balance between hope and realism, between control and acceptance, between fighting and surrendering, is extraordinarily difficult to maintain. Too much optimism risks denial of serious risks. Too much pessimism risks self-fulfilling prophecy and loss of will to continue treatment and self-care. Charlie's apparent ability to hold both truth, that he has good chance of surviving and that cancer could still kill him, demonstrates emotional maturity and spiritual strength. Throughout both his recovery from addiction and his battles with cancer, Charlie Wilson has emphasized the importance of support systems, family, faith community, friends, and fans who have sustained him during darkest times. Coming from a family where 3 brothers shared musical careers and where gospel music provided spiritual foundation, Charlie has always understood that survival and success are communal, rather than purely individual achievements. His brothers Ronnie and Robert, despite whatever strain Charlie's addiction years placed on their relationships, remained connected and supportive. The Wilson family bond, forged in their father's church and strengthened through decades of performing together, provided anchor that helped prevent Charlie from drifting so far that return became impossible. Charlie's Christian faith, rooted in his upbringing as minister's son and choir member, has been central to both his recovery narrative and his approach to cancer. He speaks about God's grace, about being given second chances, about faith sustaining him through times when his own strength faltered. Whether this faith is understood as literal divine intervention or as powerful psychological and community resource, its importance to Charlie's survival is undeniable. The broader community, recovery fellowship for his addiction, cancer support networks for his illness, fans who have followed his career and expressed love and support, provides practical and emotional resources. Charlie speaks about messages from fans encouraging him, about prayers offered by people he's never met, about the tangible difference that feeling connected and supported makes when facing life-threatening challenges. One of the remarkable aspects of Charlie Wilson's story is that his voice, the instrument of his artistry and livelihood, survived largely intact despite years of abuse during his addiction. Cocaine use, heavy alcohol consumption, and the general physical degradation that accompanies severe addiction and homelessness could easily have destroyed his vocal cords permanently, ending his musical career even if he survived to get sober. That Charlie's voice not only survived but continues performing at high level into his 70s represents both physiological luck and the resilience that singing in church from childhood built into his technique. Gospel-trained singers typically develop vocal technique that protects their voices from damage, allowing for powerful, emotionally intense singing without the vocal cord damage that destroys many singers' voices by middle age. Charlie's voice in his solo career maintains the smoothness, power, and emotional expressiveness that defined the Gap Band's sound, while adding depth and character that come from life experience. When he sings about love, loss, faith, and survival, audiences hear not just technical skill, but lived reality. Someone who knows what he's singing about because he's experienced it firsthand. His influence on contemporary R&B and soul is profound and ongoing. The smooth, melodic, yet powerful vocal style that Charlie exemplifies has been adopted by countless subsequent singers. His ability to blend gospel roots with funk rhythms and R&B melodicism created template that continues influencing how R&B is performed and produced. As Charlie Wilson continues battling recurrent prostate cancer, his future remains uncertain in ways both immediate, will treatment be successful, and longer term. How many more years does he have, whether cancer-free or managing chronic disease? He has maintained his characteristically positive public stance while acknowledging the seriousness of his situation. Recent updates suggest Charlie is continuing treatment while still performing when possible, maintaining the active lifestyle he believes supports his recovery while facing the reality that cancer and its treatment are exhausting and limiting. His touring schedule has been reduced but not eliminated, reflecting his determination to continue doing what he loves while respecting his body's limitations. The cancer community, and particularly prostate cancer survivors and advocates, have embraced Charlie's openness about his diagnosis and recurrence. His willingness to discuss his situation helps reduce stigma, encourages screening and early detection, and provides representation for Black men facing prostate cancer at disproportionately high rates. Charlie Wilson's life offers numerous lessons about resilience, recovery, and the possibility of redemption, even from seemingly hopeless circumstances. Addiction is not destiny. Charlie's journey from successful musician to homeless addict to recovered performer demonstrates that addiction, while devastating, need not be permanent. Recovery is possible even from the deepest depths of addiction, though it requires genuine commitment, support systems, and often multiple attempts. Success doesn't protect against illness or suffering. Fame and financial success, which Charlie achieved with the Gap Band, couldn't prevent his addiction, his cancer, or any of the suffering he's experienced. The illusion that achievement or wealth provides immunity from life's hardships is exactly that, an illusion. Openness about struggle helps others. Charlie's willingness to discuss his addiction and recovery publicly has inspired countless others struggling with substance abuse. His openness about cancer similarly provides encouragement and representation for others facing the disease. Physical action matters. Whether recovering from addiction or fighting cancer, Charlie emphasizes the importance of movement, physical action, and doing, rather than simply thinking or wishing. This practical wisdom applies broadly to life's challenges. Fear of death diminishes with experience. Charlie's evolution from fear of death to acceptance reflects wisdom that often comes with age and survival of life-threatening challenges. Death becomes less terrifying when understood as natural conclusion rather than aberration. Community and support are essential. Throughout his struggles, Charlie has been sustained by family, faith community, recovery fellowship, and fans. Survival is communal. We need others to make it through life's darkest moments. It's never too late for redemption. Charlie was in his 40s, homeless, and seemingly beyond hope when he entered recovery. His subsequent 20-plus years of sobriety and musical success demonstrate that transformation and redemption remain possible, regardless of how far one has fallen. As Charlie Wilson fights recurrent prostate cancer at age 71, he embodies the survival, resilience, and determination that have characterized his entire remarkable journey. From church choirs in Tulsa to funk superstardom with the Gap Band, through the devastation of addiction and homelessness to hard-won recovery, through initial cancer diagnosis and successful treatment to current recurrence, Charlie has survived challenges that would have destroyed many others. His voice, that extraordinary instrument that has moved audiences for over 5 decades, continues singing, testimony to resilience and the healing power of music. His message, emphasizing movement, energy, and practical action while maintaining faith and accepting mortality with equanimity, offers wisdom born from direct experience of life's hardest lessons. Whether Charlie Wilson ultimately survives this cancer recurrence or succumbs to it, his legacy is secure. He has given the world music that continues bringing joy and moving listeners. He has provided inspiration and hope to those struggling with addiction, demonstrating that recovery and redemption are possible. He has modeled vulnerability and openness, showing that speaking honestly about our struggles helps both ourselves and others. Uncle Charlie has lived multiple lifetimes within his 71 years: superstar, addict, homeless survivor, recovered performer, cancer fighter. Each phase has taught lessons, created music, and contributed to the complex, fully human story of a man who has experienced both devastating lows and triumphant highs. His journey continues, each day another opportunity to move, to create, to connect, to fight, to live fully whatever time remains. The energy that Charlie Wilson emphasizes, the movement, the vitality, the commitment to staying active and engaged, represents more than just cancer-fighting strategy. It represents a philosophy of living fully regardless of circumstances, of refusing to surrender to limitation or despair, of maintaining purpose and meaning, even when facing mortality. In this sense, Charlie Wilson's battle with cancer is simply the latest expression of how he's approached his entire life, moving forward, staying active, refusing to quit, finding reasons to keep going even when every reason suggests surrender might be easier. And so Uncle Charlie continues, singing when able, fighting always, inspiring through both his music and his example, demonstrating that survival requires not just luck or medical intervention, but also the daily choice to move, to engage, to provide energy to healthy cells through the simple act of refusing to give up. The outcome of his current battle remains uncertain, but the courage and wisdom with which he faces it are already evident, already contributing to his legacy, already helping others facing their own battles to find strength in his example.